So hopefully, had some technical issues, some really bad ones, but everything should be fine, I hope. And basically, if there are any issues, comment below. But what we're going to do today, hopefully in this video, I've said hopefully about 4 times now, is we're going to be talking about Liz Truss and her idiotic policies to get a trade deal with Australia. So, allies of Liz Truss say she plans to sit Aussie Trade Minister Tehan down in the Locarno room in Foreign Office in an uncomfortable chair, so he has to deal with her directly for 9 hours. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dealing with Liz Truss for 9 hours does sound like hell, and to be fair, I would probably sign anything. False confession, having a coup against the government. If I had to listen to Liz Truss for 9 hours, forget the uncomfortable chair. That's just bad. But yeah, we go into the article, which says that Liz Truss has thrown down the gauntlet to her Australian counterpart over the glacially slow progress in trade deals. Her allies urged Canberra, which is the capital of Australia, which I always thought was Sydney, but you learn something new every day, to show us the colour of their money. I don't understand what the hell that means, but sure, we've said to Australia, show us the colour of your money. All right. We see that the International Trade Secretary is preparing for a showdown negotiation with Dan Tehan, Australia's Trade Minister, after he accepted her invitation to meet face-to-face in London this week. Big mistake, pal. Big mistake. Sources in her department told The Telegraph that Australia needs to show some serious movement on their side. I tried to click on to see what the problems were, but I got paywalled. So if anyone knows, tell me in the comments below. But until then, I don't know. But apparently they stalled because Mr. Tehan took up the role in December. So she's expecting this man to be good at his role within the space of less than 4 months. She wanted them to sign a trade deal. No. Come on, man. No. Within 4 months, there's no way anyone would be able to be a competent trade secretary. Ridiculous. By contrast, the first 4 rounds of talks led by his predecessor, Simon Birmingham, and Ms. Truss made really rapid progress. But then, if you made such good progress with the last guy, how come it's taken you so long to get a deal in the first place? Clearly this is a myth. Canberra, you would think that they would have a deal signed by now. She's had a long time. She's had long enough to sign a deal with Australia anyways. Because she could have negotiated during, I think, the transition period. She could have still spoke to him, I believe. So Canberra has been accused of being slow to move on key UK asks, including on sensitive areas in services, investment and business visas. So obviously, if these are sensitive areas, they're going to take longer to negotiate. It's not hard, particularly in legal services and management consultancy. So the issue is that you're going to have to make sure that British people understand Australian law if you want to work in legal services and management consultancy. You're going to have to make sure they understand Australian culture and Australian laws. Okay, if you want to work in consultancy and legal services, vice versa, Aussies are going to have to learn about British law and British management practices. As well as British services, etc. You're going to have to learn about equivalency, what are the rules around investment, etc., taxes and all that stuff. So you can see why it would take so long to discuss this sort of stuff. These sectors are viewed as central to the British economy's recovery from the pandemic. These sectors are important, but this trade deal won't add that much to the economy as a whole. And we'll be discussing that in a minute. So the UK wants to see Australian tariffs slashed on Scotch whisky and cars, both levied at 5%, which isn't that high. 5% isn't that much. Honestly. By turn, Canberra is pushing for bigger wins on agriculture, particularly lower tariff on meat exported to Britain. And so if we actually look at Australia, so at the moment they have, if you look here, they inject their cattle with hormones, estrogen, progesterone, I don't know what that one is, and testosterone, or synthetic hormones, trenbolone, and Zeranol. So these are stuff you would assume a UFC fight would get popped for by USADA, but they are plugging their animals with hormones, and we don't do that in Britain. So that's going to be an issue as well. It means that only certain meat exporters in Australia can sell this stuff unless Australia are going to try and get us to lower standards. That's a possibility. So a bilateral trade deal between the two nations expected to boost the UK's exports to Australia by 900 million, and that sounds like a lot of money. 900 million pounds to us is a lot of money, but to the actual economy, it's not a ton. Mr. Tehan arrives in London on Wednesday, so he'll arrive today, but be, depending on time of upload, which will hopefully be today, But talks will begin tomorrow, so whatever comes out of this, I'll update you on. He's expected to launch a media and PR blitz while in London. He doesn't have to do this. So it's strange he's doing this. A source close to Miss Truss quipped she plans to sit him in the we mentioned this, in the uncomfortable chair, and he has to deal with her directly for 9 hours. That's a nightmare. That's an existential nightmare. That's genuinely the stuff, I'd be terrified. It's a poor man. He doesn't realise what he signed up for. It says here, Australia need to show the money. They're great friends of ours and talk a good game about free trade and wanting a deal, but they need to match those words with action. The thing is, I've not seen a lot from Australia who, telling us they want a deal. From what I've seen, the Australians told us, you do not want to be a third country dealing with the EU because it's a nightmare. So, again, I don't understand, what they're trying to, I don't think the kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? The desire to get a deal, I don't think it's massively on the Australian side. I think it's more on the UK side because we're desperate to, Brexit. They're desperate for Brexit results, essentially. They've got one kind of false victory with the vaccines, but they're desperate for trade deals. The EU doesn't have a trade deal with Australia. I think it's working towards one to an extent, but that's it's not a tier one priority, I guess. So they're desperate. The UK are desperate to look good from this. So I think it's the UK side that are trying to push this. That's why we invited this guy over, to come to the UK for talks. We're desperate to push this through, not the other way around. It is thought that there is pressure on Mr. Han to make a substantial breakthrough before flying back to Australia on Friday night, given the rare exception for him made for him to leave the country amid a strict closure of the border. So it is quite interesting. Obviously, Australia have dealt with the coronavirus very well, to the point where they have a corridor with a travel corridor with New Zealand, who have dealt with the coronavirus pandemic exceptionally well. So for them to allow this dude, Mr. Tahan, to leave Australia for the UK is a very bold decision, especially since we have another new variant, the Indian one, in the UK. So again, maybe Australia do want a result here, or maybe the Aussies are playing nice. Who knows? But I didn't know if the land of crocodiles and black widows does play nice. So, you let me know about that. Any Aussies in the chat. British officials believe it is highly unlikely, although not impossible, that a trade deal could be clinched between the pair before his departure. An agreement could, or otherwise an agreement could be achieved within 6 to 8 weeks. So they're optimistic that they can announce this thing within a few months, really, that a deal will be struck. So that's going to be interesting to see, what happens. So Truss, employed a similar tactic with Japan last summer, using occasionally fiery face-to-face negotiations with a Japanese counterpart to make headway over the most contentious issues. So if we actually look at that, this is full fact here. They do good work. So they talk about the UK-Japan deal. So the new deal goes beyond the EU's deal in areas such as e-commerce and financial services, but it also has some drawbacks. For example, the UK reportedly wanted to receive quotas for some agricultural products, which could be exported with a lower tariff than normal. Instead, the UK will get whatever is left of the EU's quota with Japan, potentially putting the UK exporters at a disadvantage. So we get the crumbs from the EU, the stuff that the EU doesn't want to export, or the stuff that is left over. We get that. So that's great. In September, Euronews reported, I think that's Lana Dreyer, I think that's how you pronounce that, founder of the European trade policy analysis website Borderlex, as saying, fundamentally, this is an exercise in keeping status quo and damage limitations. So this UK-Japan deal, hasn't really benefited the economy that much. I don't think they've even published an impact assessment for the UK-Japan deal. The only thing they compare it to is having no deal with Japan, which was never on the table. It's as part of the EU, we had a deal with Japan, or by doing no deal, we still potentially could have had a deal with Japan. It would be separate, but the only thing they've compared it to is WTO terms, which is ridiculous. Here we have Dr. Minako Morita Jaeger, international trade policy consultant and fellow at the University of Sussex, writes, while the agreement has a certain political significance, its economic impact is likely to be very small. This is because it contains very limited improvements relative to the EU-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement. Also, I think the EU-Japan deal actually says that Japan can't give better terms than what they've given to the EU in their trade deal. So again, Japan weren't in a position where they were going to give us a better trade deal. Why would they? We're a much smaller, poorer entity than the EU as a whole. We have less people here. So ultimately, while it seems like additional provisions in the UK deal will have little impact, trade experts also do not expect the new deal to be worse than the old one. So, this tremendous, trade exercise that she used on Japan is just a myth. It's a myth, honestly. It says here annual UK trade with Australia is worth 18 billion, with services accounting for 60%. So this deal most likely will not include services, and it's only worth 900 million. That could be an optimistic projection as well, given that this is the Telegraph. But it's going to add a bit more onto what we trade already. But given that 60% is with services, 40% are goods, so it's not going to make that much leeway unless you get a deal with services, which is far more difficult. Countries are, I think, less likely to do a trade deal on services. But yeah, it's not that great. There is a wider strategic importance to a bilateral deal for Britain because the government wants to join the CPTPP, the 9 trillion free trade area in which Australia is a key player later this year. The CPTPP is not as great as they make it out to be, especially since where is it? There it is. The CPTPP is closer to joining. The process is closer to joining that of the WTO. So you set up a schedule, things like that. So it says it here. Instead, work usually gets underway on crafting new member-specific schedules, similar to the WTO, which you talk about tariff cuts, and I think it takes like certain members to agree to your ideas in order for them to come through. So, services include financial services. Investment restrictions will remain in place after joining the CPTPP. So, other services and investments will be opened up, but I think that it keeps government ones separate. The CPTPP is quite confusing, but it's not going to be that great, especially given that you typically trade with countries that are closer to you. Most of these countries are very far away, and you could argue that these countries in the CPTPP are quite far from each other. So I doubt they massively trade with each other. Anyways, Russia and the US are quite close. Sort of this end of Russia, I guess. But I doubt there's a massive amount of trade that happens compared to how much the US would do with Canada, for example. Also, we know that China and Australia have been having trade disputes for a while. So, the argument that this guy, Mr. Tahan, is a lightweight, maybe he personally is, but, the person above him might not be his prime minister. Also, the fact that, Australia are far more understanding of trade battles than the UK are. Australia are in trade disputes with China right now. The Goliath, literally the second highest, strongest country in the world, or most powerful country. Whitehall calls this CPTPP thing they want to be a crucial counterweight to China. Good luck with that, pal. Good luck with that, buddy. Honestly, crucial counterweight to China. The USA are already in this CPTPP thing. How many more counterweights do you need? And they're angry at its trade practices that are accused of distorting markets. If you sign up to the CPTPP, okay, and you make some sort of agreement with China, for example, what's going to happen is it's going to make it easier for China to export to our market. So you're just going to help China. We go to, this clip of Liz Truss, which I find hilarious.
We are growing wheat more competitively than the Canadian prairies.
And, she's waiting for a clap, but it's not coming.
We're producing more varieties of cheese than the French.
Great, it's quality over quantity. Who cares how many varieties of cheese we're making? It's just ridiculous, the argument she makes in this. Remember that point about the quantities of cheese as well.
And we are selling tea to China. Yorkshire tea.
It's like grown in Sri Lanka, but it's repackaged in the UK or packaged in the UK. So, you don't grow tea in Yorkshire. I don't think that's physically possible.
When it comes to British food and drink, we have never had it so good. But as well as exporting our fantastic food abroad, I want to see us eating more British food here in Britain.
So if our food is so great, why are we importing so much? Is it because we don't produce enough, or, You know, maybe foreign goods are as good or better to some people. People like what they like, maybe. I don't know.
At the moment, we import 2/3 of all of our apples. We import 9/10 of all of our pears.
With the fruit stuff, I mean, fruit is in season and not in season. So obviously, you're gonna have to import certain fruits when they're not in season. Like, this is a really stupid argument. Like, how many apples do you want them to produce when it's apple season, or when it's pear season? You know, honestly, this lady is insane. Like, no wonder, you know, her strategy of putting someone on an uncomfortable chair and having to deal with her with 9 hours might work, because she's crazy.
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace.
2/3 of our cheese. So we are, you know, we have more varieties of cheese than the French, okay? But yet we're importing 2/3 of our cheese. So maybe it is quality over quantity, Liz Truss. Have you ever thought about that? The worst thing was she was a Remainer and she's just completely flipped to the other side, and she's insane. It kind of reminds me of this moment when her pauses. One of my favourite moments of all time.
Of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
Just going to replay that for you guys.
Please clap. Creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
You know, when she does her awkward pauses, especially at the beginning, I'm going to put you through
We
it one
are
more time.
growing wheat more competitively than the Canadian prairies.
Please clap.
That's what it reminds me of, honestly. You know, the arguments made here, it's going to add a bit more onto the deal, the trade we do with Australia, hopefully. That's not that big a win. 900 million on top of 18 billion, that seems like a lot, but it's genuinely not. Also, the fact that it's not a guarantee it's going to go up by that much. Australia is very far away. Especially as, you know, countries, I think, become more conscious of the climate. I think doing trade with countries that are so far away, may not be done as much because how much damage it does to the environment. Anyways, she's crazy, and I'm going to leave it there. You know, that might seem a bit misogynistic because she's a woman, but I'm going to tell you straight. You look at this person's face right now and hear what she said.
We are growing wheat more.
You know, does it sound like someone who's sane, who has it all together? Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. And the uncomfortable chair thing. You know, anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.